Good evening, good morning, whenever you're tuning in. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to talk about and explore experiential learning together. I'm going to talk about in this lecturette the theory of experiential learning and its relevance to our roles both as students in this class and as teachers, future or present teachers, educators, facilitators. Um, and it can get a little confusing to navigate between these, two roles and can get kind of meta, but just do your best to follow with me. And we'll certainly go over this and continue to go over this as the semester continues. So here is just a quote from David Kolb. Kolb is a name that you'll see, and maybe you already have seen, as one of the key people behind experiential learning, or a popularizer, and one of the theorists of experiential learning. So he says, learning is a continuous process grounded in experience. Knowledge is continuously derived and tested out in the experiences of the learner. So you can just take a moment to look at this on your own. I just read it to you. But for those of you who like to take an extra moment to read, so we're going to review the theory a little bit. Another theorist, in addition to Kolb, is Dewey, and Dewey dates back earlier than Kolb. And in Dewey's eyes, experiential learning, he says all genuine education comes about through experience. However, it's more nuanced than this, right? Learning isn't necessarily confined to a formal institution or a formal setting. And I think at this point, we've talked a little bit about the difference between formal and non-formal. So when I say formal, I mean like a school or an institution. Like, he's expanding to say that learning doesn't have to happen in this way. And learning can be achieved through reflecting on everyday experience. And it's the way that actually a lot of us, most of us, do our learning. And so I think we have to sort of unlearn this idea that the only time and place that learning happens is in a classroom. And so another theorist, or Dewey says this through another author who quoted him, saying education occurs as a direct participation in the events of life. And there's two principles at play here that are worth unpacking a little bit. And those are the principles of continuity and interaction. And so by continuity, it means learners have to connect what they have learned from the current experience to the past, as well as see possible implications for the future. And by this, I mean, in order to connect it to a memory or to say, this is going to be significant for me in the future, I have to, it's kind of the process of making meaning or finding something to be meaningful, right? So continuity. Interaction is the relationship between the learner and their environment. And these two principles are interconnected, and they work together to provide the basis of experiential learning. And so developing a welcoming and comfortable atmosphere, the environment, is important. Providing the right materials, linking the materials, which is, the content, to the learner's past and future experiences, is critical in helping adults learn from their experiences. And I'll talk about this a little bit more because, yes, we are always learning as humans, but to actually call it experiential learning, there is some strategy and there is some design. And that's where the principles of continuity and interaction come into play, to say that how are you facilitating the learner to connect to the experience? And so we'll talk about this. Key models we look at, and I think in one of the other readings that you have, you'll see the experiential learning cycle. This is a famous model of 4 elements, and I think this comes up in the next slide or two. And there's a few different ways we can illustrate and articulate this. It depends which theorist you're looking at, but concrete experience, observation and reflection, the formation of abstract concepts, and testing it in new situations, and then evaluation happening throughout this cycle. So there are a few different that we'll look at, and there are some questions that I'm going to pose now that I want you to just sort of marinate in while I talk, and we'll consider them as a group. What leads to learning from experience? So is the context in which the experience happens important? How can we design learning episodes or learning experiences to capture this experiential component best? So as you're planning your micro teaching, maybe you've already conducted lessons. For it to really embody the principles of experiential learning, we're going to look at these elements and how you can design your time, whether it be 10 minutes for your micro teaching lesson, or if you're doing an entire semester, or if you have a whole farm season. How are you going to design your time with your participants in an effective way so that, of course, they're learning by doing, but are you giving them space to connect with what's happening and reflect with what's happening and evaluate with what's happening? So this is an example. I think Nikki Burton, faculty in our program, does this really well. This is an older group of students from her pigs and poultry class. This is a course where you're learning by doing, you get direct feedback. You're building a chicken tractor, and this chicken tractor might not work, and Nikki might say, you know, what did we do? What didn't we do? How can we make this even better? So this is, you know, I think a pedagogy that you'll see in Stockbridge, and maybe you've seen in your other courses, and maybe you haven't yet. And I think that as we go, you'll start to and continue to reflect on, oh, I think I have been on the receiving end of experiential education. So there's some characteristics and qualities of experiential learning that you'll look at in your readings. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I wanted to just put some language to it. So experiential learning strives to be holistic rather than reductionist, which means it includes the environment that we're learning in, and it includes the learner in a way that a reductionist environment or approach wouldn't, right? Because the reductionist approach doesn't consider the environment. We'll go over this a little bit more. It's based on direct experience. It starts where the learner is, not where the teacher wants the learner to be. The process of learning is just as valuable. And to go back to the example of the chicken tractor, faculty member Nikki Burton wants students to experience the process of building a chicken tractor. And if it doesn't go well, that's okay, because Nikki values the process of doing it just as much as the completed tractor, the outcome. In agriculture, we are fortunate that we have an environment and a landscape that we're often learning by doing. And so agriculture and sustainable agriculture lend itself well to experiential learning. So these are student-centered pedagogical approaches. So that means a lot of the learning experiences, the learning outcomes of the course, the readings that I choose, for example, are designed for you. The qualities of this kind of teaching, this experiential learning, is compassion, communication, and personal growth. So this is just an outline. It'll become more clear to you. Some of this is in the reading as well. This is the model I was referencing. And in order to reflect these 4 components, we're going to start with, before diving into just building a chicken tractor, we're going to find out, okay, has anybody in this class built a chicken tractor before? Oh, I see that Porter has. How did you do it, right? So drawing on what the people in your audience already know and might have done already, and then building on that and saying, oh, you know, that's one way to do it, but we're gonna try it this way because XYZ, right? And you can clarify concepts like, well, another way to think of it is, yes, that's true. Those are all true. And this, right? So you're building blocks on a base, on a foundation that might already be in the room, and that you might be with, if you're leading a community workshop, a real range of experience. And then participants, this is where it gets juicy. They practice. That's the doing. They're experientially engaged in a process or a practice or a build or a planting or a harvest, or, right? Could be anything. And another, this is the critical piece, is the reflection. So prompting participants to really be able to say, well, how did that go? Instead of just building a chicken tractor and just assuming that we got what we needed out of it, creating the space as the educator for the learner to reflect on what went well. And so the reflection and evaluation is happening all throughout this process, ideally. But in order for it to be true experiential learning, you have to have these pieces. And this is what we're striving for in experiential education. So I can take students on a field trip, but if I'm just like, beautiful farm, beautiful day, and we go out there and then we get back on the bus, right? There's a missed opportunity there to really engage, like, who's been to this kind of farm before? Oh, what was it like? Great. Well, we're going to see what they're doing here at Warner Farm with their strawberries, right? So we're building on that. And then we're going to work in the field and we're going to pick these strawberries. And then on the bus ride home, what did you notice about those strawberries? Was it different than your experience in California, right? So you see what I'm saying? Hopefully you're still with me. So I just sort of went over this, but this can look a few different ways. So it feels strange to give a lecturette on experiential learning. So we're going to, I'm giving this as a way also for you to evaluate in your other classes and in this class. This is already happening, right? So one of the things that I do is I give a pre-course assessment. And so I've done this every year. Before I start teaching, I ask my students what they know, what they want to know, what the needs might be in the group that I'm working with. And that can happen in a semester, that can happen in an activity. I can say, what do you know about experiential learning? One way I've prompted this in the past is on the chalkboard, I'll just write experiential learning with a circle. And then I just do a brain blast or a word cloud and have students say little bits and pieces and capture those, right? That's one way to pull the group. You can do it behaviorally. I can conduct an icebreaker with a group of kids and say, okay, I'm going to make some assessments about, this might be one way to find out what they know about gardens, by just looking at their comfortability by doing a walk around the garden, or doing a name of a vegetable, right? Pre-quiz, a little homework assignment. So there's a lot of ways you can sort of pull and find out what your participants know before you dive in. And then we're going to build on what we know. And ideally, your flexibility, you want to be a little flexible, because there almost always is going to be a range of experience in the room. So this is going to be weaving the needs of the group with your objectives. And that is the crux of education, right? That is like, I've got this place where I want you to be in 45 minutes, and you might not get there. And so how am I going to adapt and adjust all along the way? How can I engage all levels of experience? And this is also a place where peer-to-peer learning is essential. So creating space for folks to share with each other, whether this be adults. It's a little bit harder with kids, but not necessarily. But if I want to say, you know, Cassandra, oh, I know you're interested in animals, and Hannah, I know you're interested in animals, and I want you two to be in a group, and right? So looking at opportunities for folks to work together, and that could be a pair share, that could be, there's the online and discussion forums, breakout rooms that we do in our class now. So small groups really help to build space for peer-to-peer learning. And that's what we're doing right now, is we're building on. I'm not getting a chance to ask you live what you know about this, but we will. And then we're coming to the exciting part, the practice and the application. This is a student, former TA, giving a workshop on making different body scrubs with different aromatherapy herbs from the Franklin Permaculture Garden. So it's going to look different, right? We did a little visualization exercise about where we might see ourselves as educators in 5 years, 10 years. 3 months, maybe an already, a role you've already had as an educator is something that you saw. So practicing this can look a lot of different ways. So I can take my students on a field trip. I can have my students design their own micro teaching lessons, right? That's an opportunity for participants to practice something. You can, with younger kids, say we're going to talk about plant roots, and I'm going to find out what my group of second graders knows about plant roots, and then we're going to talk about the root of a plant, and then we're going to harvest carrots, or we're going to seed carrots, and we're going to practice carrots, or we're going to go look on it, we're going to go for a walk around the neighborhood and look at different roots of different trees. And then as long as we're matching that clear objective the entire time with the practice, we're getting the hands dirty and we're creating a meaningful learning, experiential learning experience. Getting the hands dirty is good. That's why a lot of us are here. That's why I came to food and farming, is because I wanted to do things with my hands. And one of the things I'm learning about our group is that we have a lot of kinesthetic learners in the room. So we're here to do it. This is Hannah Smalls. Hannah Smalls graduated a few years ago. Hannah worked in the Food for All garden, which is now run by the student farm, but Hannah got to grow sweet potatoes and then work in the kitchen at the Amherst Survival Center and in the pantry to help distribute those. So full experience. The reflection, it's constant, it's always happening. And the more it happens, I think the more I can get out of something. And it really sharpens my critical muscle, my critical thinking muscle in the brain. Like, how could I make this even better? What would I want to do differently next time? How was this different than a previous experience I had? And striving to see blind spots, how to improve, like I just said. As a educator, one of my biggest roles is to create space for reflection and debrief. What does it look like? It can look any kind of way. We can do it on a Moodle forum, and the better questions I ask, the more effective it can be, because the better my questions are, the more opportunity I'm creating for my students to connect with a past experience, with a present feeling, or with a possible future feeling or future significance that you can see with this theme. Is this making sense? A lot of times you write reflections for classes and it can feel like busy work because it isn't sequenced in a way that can really be experiential, truly. So one of the things that we'll talk about in this class is the frame of now what? And so when I say now what is like drawing and pushing your participants to put in their own words implications for the future. Like, why is this important? So the quality of reflection questions is important. And as you know about me, I care a lot about feelings. And so I think in this approach that I have is like, how can I really be embodied and get my students to think about, well, how does that feel? But that's my approach. This is just for me. So in our context, we are working in agriculture. The nature of this work is hands-on. And so there's a lot of opportunity. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of decisions that are happening every moment that I'm making, that Roisin makes, that your other instructors make, and sometimes that's how do we adapt. There's kind of this like every moment is an experience that we can reflect on, but we also want to keep in sight our broader course goals. And so when you do your micro teaching, you're going to write learning objectives, and these learning objectives are what you're going to use to guide the ship, right? So you're going to apply, we're always sort of applying critical reflection throughout our lives, and these tools that we're exploring are just tools. And so my hope in this class, like I said early on, is to just build and grow your toolboxes. And in the process, my toolbox continues to grow because you're teaching me. So we can always make these tools better. They're always getting better. And we can't just be using these tools that were, you know, like the experiential learning cycle is a theory, is a model of a theory. And these theorists, they continue to expand and grow and become more alive and accurate as time goes on. And the social identity wheel we talked about is a tool for a conversation, and that tool could be even better. So throughout this class, I want you to think of these theories, these frameworks, and these tools as offerings, and you take what you want, take what works for you, make them your own, because what I think makes educators the very best is those educators that do the things that they would want to do themselves. And that's why I ask you questions of like, what kind of experience, do you have a memory of a positive learning experience in the field, and how could we recreate that? Why was that positive for you? So this is just a light introduction. I promised you it would be a lecturette, so I am going to stop. But just to kind of get the juices flowing about experiential education, again, with a lot of experience, varying levels of experience and practice with this in our group. This is just to get us all on the same page. There's a couple readings there for you to check out, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, whenever you're tuning in. I'll see you soon and we will discuss.